Hello everyone and welcome on back to the channel. It has been... As soon as I start recording, there are a bunch of motorcycles just going right by. Welcome on back to the channel. It's been quite a while and there's been so much that has developed with Guild Wars 2 over the couple months that I have last touched base here. However, I have been over on Twitch live streaming Guild Wars 2 and various other games, so if you're ever interested or wondering what I'm up to, you might catch me over there, you might not. Sometimes I'm just so preoccupied with the real world that I forget to dip my toes into the internet. But here we are, yet again, after a good amount of time that has passed, is bringing us back together. The most exciting and the most interesting one to take a look at is the teaser for Expansion 5, and also the year-long retrospective that ArenaNet has done when looking back on Secrets of the Obscure, talking about what they've learned and what they might have missed on, and hopefully what they will improve upon in the next expansion. Oh, we're gonna start with the blog post. I was thinking I would take you through what I experienced this morning, but if I did that, some of you would be very sweaty right now because I went to the gym. So we have the article, Secrets of the Obscure, looking back and forward. Now this was written by Josh Davis, the game director for Guild Wars 2, and it really lays out various items of interest in terms of story, in terms of scope, game systems, and he comments on various things that worked well and various things that might have been a little bit of a shortcoming. Let's jump to the part that is the retrospective. A quick history refresher. A little over a year and a half ago, we announced that we'd be transitioning from the long-standing Living World model to smaller, more frequent annual expansions. This was a significant shift, but the new direction was born out of an examination of the pain points experienced by our players and our developers. The reasons we laid out for this change, and what we hoped to achieve by it, were simple but deeply important. 1. Deliver content updates in a more consistent and timely manner. 2. Provide better support for the systems and game modes that make up the Guild Wars 2 experience. And 3. Enable ArenaNet employees to enjoy a better work-life balance. Now that we've completed a full expansion release cycle, I can confidently say that we've made significant strides towards these goals. But as with all things, there's room for improvement, both in terms of the content we deliver and the process through which we deliver it. For today, I'm going to focus on some of what we've learned on the content side of things. So first and foremost, we have story, which I think is the biggest kind of pain point that most of us experienced through these 3 intermittent patch updates in between Secrets of the Obscure and this next expansion. The content that patches out so that we can still play the game, get story, and get our bang for our buck for the expansions. Josh writes, the conclusion of the Elder Dragon Saga and Guild Wars 2 End of Dragons presented us with a unique opportunity to delve into a different kind of storytelling. We aim to focus on deeper narratives grounded in the characters and circumstances around the player character. However, with Soto, our ambition led us to take on a broader scope than was feasible. We introduced a lot of new characters, and the plot was too complex for what we can reasonably handle within an annual expansion. This left some character interactions feeling rushed and story threads unexplored. More isn't always better. We learned a lot from this experience and have a much greater understanding of story scale within our new release structure. For our next expansion, we're going to tell a more grounded story set in a new region of Tyria, with more of a focus on local threats and the global conversation around those threats. Tyria, despite all of its challenges, has continued to stir. While we leave Nyos and the Cryptists to enjoy their newfound freedom, the story will pick up on some threads started in Guild Wars 2 Soto, continuing with the Astral Ward arc, their moral ambiguity, and their relationship to Tyria. All of these were great points to touch on in terms of Nyos, because when it comes to this entire expansion experience, maybe more on that to come in another video, the base expansion I found to be very pleasant. I found that the base release was really good. But when we got to the other updates, that's when things started to kind of fall apart a bit more. And the cadence of release windows, the amount of map that was released per update, it just left me wanting more. And particularly with the scope of the expansion, it was so broad, it was so large that I truly believe that the Nio storyline should have been a second expansion, and rightfully could still be its own expansion if they ever wanted to revisit Nios and give it the proper love it deserves. Next, they talk about the map design. And they say that in Soto, we delivered 3 new open worlds. The third map, Inner Nios, was released with the first quarterly update in November 2023, and was then expanded on in our second and third quarterly updates with new playable space and event content. After extensive adventuring in Inner Nios in recent months, it's clear that using a single map as the main focal point for 3 releases is not ideal from a player or developer standpoint. Our decision to do so originally stemmed from production constraints and overlapping development timelines between expansions, but we've since identified some ways to mitigate those issues, both in terms of release structure and process improvements. For our next expansion, Expansion 5, our first 2 maps will be released as the expansions launch, just as they did in Soto. However, the final map will arrive in the second quarterly update, and be expanded upon in the third, meaning it will be expanded on for 2 total releases like Bureau Marches and Drizzlewood Coast. Not only does this give our team a bit more time to develop the third map, it also means that the story during the next expansion cycle will better leverage all 3 maps and take you back to familiar areas from your past adventures. While the first quarterly release after the expansion's launch won't include the third open world map of the expansion, as it did with Soto, there will be plenty of new content to keep you busy in the time frame, in terms of story, open world content, and encounters. I know that's a little vague, again, check back in next week's blog post, but rest assured that first quarterly release will include something really exciting that players have been requesting for over 5 years. Raid alert, raid alert, raid alert, raid, did you hear that? Raids. Well, they didn't say raids, but I think we can all kind of read between the lines here. 5 years, it's been 5 years since the last Raid Wing was released. Raids as a concept in terms of storytelling and how they can integrate that into story and create a more understandable endgame system. Truly exciting. So I've kind of always been on the side that raids could return in some fashion, in some manner, however that would be. And I'm excited to maybe be in a reality where raids are going to return in an expansion format, and perhaps this would carry on to the other expansions. I really hope this isn't just like a one-off, but they are able to and committed to producing some form of high-end endgame content for the expansions and for PvE players. Now for features about Soto and Expansion 5, I'm guessing. MMOs are made up of numerous gameplay systems and content types, each with a different role to play in the game experience. As games go on, they tend to accumulate more and more systems and features from expansions and the like, which is fine if there's effort put into maintaining and updating those systems. Looking back over the game's history, I think this maintenance and upkeep is one of the areas where we've fallen short. At times, even falling into the trap of releasing new features for the sake of releasing new features, even if they overlap with something that already exists. This is something we've been referring to internally as putting a hat on a hat. And you might remember, but I also put a hat on top of a hat during the Extra Life livestream podcast that I did with ArenaNet and the Lightbringers podcast. Hey, I like to imagine myself as the personification of that mantra. Over the last 2 years, we've put much more of a focus on upkeep and iteration of systems and avoiding unnecessary bloat where possible. We put more of a focus on maintaining live game systems, and with Soto, we even went to the extent of entirely reworking existing features to make room for more modernized solutions. The Wizard's Vault is a good example of this strategy, working out well for us. And you can expect to see a new system being introduced in Expansion 5 that adds a meaningful new way to spend your time in Guild Wars 2, while using this as an opportunity to greatly improve the player experience with related existing game systems. Now, what does this mean? Could this be like an LFG system? Because an LFG system would logically interact with other areas of the game, perhaps like instance matchmaking for dungeons, fractals, strike missions, raids. However that might be realized in the game, I think an LFG system is completely necessary, especially if they are looking at, supporting endgame content more committedly with raids and strike missions and fractals. per expansion. So I would love to see a more proper LFG system. I think that is the one thing that is possible to maintain Guild Wars 2 for quite a while. Having like a daily dungeon, a daily fractal, daily strikes. We have these systems, but they're kind of segmented into the achievements. And I think if they were more homogenized in a PvE tab, where you'd be able to queue up into them very easily and freely, I think that would benefit everyone. And you can even tie that to open world, like an open world timer or a boss timer, so people can know when open world events are happening, when convergences are happening, or where other 50-player squad encounters are happening, like Marionette and the Battle for Lion's Arch. These other systems where you can really collect them all into one unit and really have pure visibility. And maybe even connect the other currencies, like dungeon tokens, the crystals, fractal relics, and whatnot. And is that what they're called, the currency? I haven't done fractals in some time, you might realize. But they continue. Overall, we were a bit conservative with features in Guild Wars 2 Soto, trying to strike the right balance between scope, schedule, and risk while navigating a new content structure. We've ironed out a lot of kinks here, and it's allowed us to be a bit more ambitious with our next expansion. Next week can't come soon enough. I'm really interested in terms of what they mean by that, in terms of systems and support, and finding out that they even realized that Soto was a bit light in terms of system updates and improvements back end and player facing. And I would love to see an expansion where they really just push a bit more in terms of refining UI potentials, LFG, character customization, whatever that might be, inventory and bank stuff. I love that we got to get a little bit of insight in terms of what they have been thinking in terms of the overall impact of Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, and where it landed strongly and where it failed strongly. And this blog post really was talking about most of the shortcomings and failures, which is smart, because when something goes right, people will passively enjoy it and then kind of move on. They don't really dwell on the positives as much as they do the negatives, because when the negatives are negative, they really sting, and it's just another thing to talk about and bring up. So it makes sense, but I'm happy to hear that they are at least acknowledging certain elements of this last year, and hopefully are setting themselves up to improve upon that. At least this blog post does convey a sense of hope, convey a sense of that we have learned from these past mistakes and shortcomings, and we are looking to fix those in the next expansion. That is not all in this blog post. They do have a section called Such a Tease. We closed out one of our recent blogs, which introduced the cosmetic inspection feature and recapped some of the quality of life changes that have gone into the game thanks to the development approach we took to Guild Wars 2 Soto, with a screenshot preview of an area you'll discover in our next expansion. We thought today would be a fun opportunity to build on that. So I'll leave you with an additional environment preview. And it's, baby, it's not just an environment preview. It's like a whole new weapon preview. I mean, I guess you could technically consider this like an entirely new weapon for the above ground system. This video is called There's Something Leaving the Water, which is a great callback to Tequaddle coming out of the water, and the Quaggins go, "There's something in the water, oh." But this video not only showcases some beautiful environment art and architecture, which we can kind of get into in a moment. It showcases a Norn coming out of the water with a spear while they're swimming. And then as soon as they get above land, onto the ground, onto the dry ground, they continue to hold that spear, and then they pull it out as a weapon. Now, this is so exciting for a multitude of reasons. 1, spear. 2, spear. 3, it's a spear. Number 4, above ground spear. Revolutionary. It's no longer just for NPCs to wield. The Seraph in Lake Doric, the Sun Spears in Guild Wars 2 Path of Fire. It's now for the player characters as well. And I think this has been a long time coming. Players have been asking for some type of new weapon to be introduced into the game. And while it's not entirely new in terms of like a great axe, a flail, crossbows, I do consider this to be a new weapon type to be introduced into the game, because it is something that we very rarely, if we're being honest with ourselves, we very rarely interact with this weapon. both the spear and the trident and the harpoon gun. Now, it's just a spear. I don't know if this is going to also translate to the trident and the harpoon gun. I find the spear to be the most worthy of all of the aquatic weapons, but it is surely exciting to see that this is now a confirmed feature in expansion 5, is that we're going to be able to use spears above ground and in normal combat. Now, as to what classes will this spear be attainable, that's another big question. Is this going to be two-handed? Is it going to be one-handed? And I like to imagine it's going to be two-handed. However, the way that the character was holding it, I mean, of course, the spear, you kind of throw it, but you can also stab it. The way that the animation is at the moment, it might change. It kind of looks like there's room for something else to be held in like the left hand, which often indicates something like purposefully main hand or offhand, because most two-handed weapons, the character will wield it with both hands. So I don't know if this is going to be like a kind of a shakeup in that. I personally would love to see this as like a main hand, because then you can dual wield with something else, really create your Paragon aesthetic. And it would be a great callback to Guild Wars 1. And it would also make the above ground spear more interesting when you compare it to the aquatic spear, as it's used two-handedly. But above ground it would be used as a main hand. I could see that being another edge that they go for. But I don't mind it being a two-handed weapon, because that just also means more skills for whichever classes get access to this. And yeah, there are so many other questions that I have. Will this count as the new weapon that a profession will get? Or is this kind of seen as it's on the class, it's been on the class for a while now, we're kind of just going to give it to them with like a whole new set of weapon skills for that? You'd probably translate a couple of the skills from underwater to above ground, because it's technically the same weapon anyways. So there are a couple elements here that, you know, I'm left with some questions, but I like having questions, because then that means that they can hopefully be answered in the future. And then you get that dopamine rush of either being right, or the anti-dopamine rush of maybe being wrong. But additionally, we can see in the background there are some civilization, there's some architecture. It kind of looks Nornish, which is interesting. It looks a bit more rustic, a bit more like crafted out of the natural environment that is around, with the trees and the timber, the grasses, the hay, whatever it might be. It looks beautiful though. And I kind of would love this to be a Norn settlement, because we don't often see Norn settlements, or what a Norn settlement would look like outside of densely snowy, cold areas. And this one looks to be a little bit more temperate as a region. There are other things that have popped up around Guild Wars 2's 5th expansion, which I won't talk about here because we're going to come back to that next week. But the juices are flowing, the community is talking. Are you? This is your call. We need you. I want you to be in the comments typing right now. But there's just so much on the horizon, I feel like, for Guild Wars 2's 5th expansion. And hopefully mostly positives in terms of things that they have, you know, learned over the past year. But we are getting into the rhythm of yet another expansion cycle release, which is really fun, honestly. We no longer have to wait upwards of 4 years to get into this mindset of, oh, they're releasing a bigger product that comes with a bunch of system updates, class expansions, new weapons, etc., etc. This is going to be something more consistent, and it was great to have that back in Secrets of the Obscure, and I cannot wait to see what they do with Expansion 5. So that's kind of it, the retrospective and the teaser for Guild Wars 2 Expansion 5 in terms of the above ground spears. And yeah, that's basically it. Thank you everyone so much for coming on by. I hope you guys enjoyed. We'll be doing some more videos here over the course of the next few weeks, because we have more to talk about with Guild Wars 2 Expansion 5, and I might even make a little video on like a complete how I felt about the Midnight King release. So if you're interested in that, head over to the Patreon, you got early access to those videos, and also stay tuned here and like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. We also are on Twitch and Twitter, don't forget, but I'll see you all later. Bye!